Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. Last week, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney went from Davos to Beijing, where he struck new economic cooperation deals with the regime. Joining us to discuss is Diana Furchtgott-Roth, director at the Center for Energy, Climate and Environment at the Heritage Foundation. Diana, welcome. It seems like British Prime Minister, Mark Carney from Canada went there to the Chinese regime, and it seemed like dueling banjos with him and Trump. At Davos, they sort of contradicted each other. They sort of took underhanded jabs at each other. And then Carney goes to Xi in China, and people are now quite upset about potentially some of the blowback from these economic deals. What's going on?
Well, Prime Minister Carney agreed to export oil to China, which is a good thing. We want China to be dependent on Western oil. And he also agreed to take 49,000 EVs from China at a preferential rate of 6% instead of 100%. And that is not so safe, because if we don't like spy drones flying above our country, we definitely don't want spy EVs or electric vehicles with the capability of spying moving around our streets. Besides, this displaces Chinese automakers, and it displaces Canadian automakers. And Canadian automakers are not pleased to have these Chinese vehicles undercutting their homemade cars. So that's the situation. Yes to the oil exports. It should be no to the vehicle imports.
And I think some might say that it's hard to have your cake and eat it too. So was there a middle path that Carney potentially could have navigated to be able to get the exports of the oil, I believe, through a pipeline that then leaves Vancouver and then goes over to China? But what leverage might Carney have had to have then been able to protect his auto industry?
China needs all the energy it can get. It's making the renewables that it's exporting all over the world. It's making these EVs. BYD, the main Chinese auto company, exported over 1 million vehicles. So China needs the energy. China needs Canadian oil. There was no reason for Prime Minister Carney to have to accept these Chinese exports of vehicles in return to the oil. He could have gone to President Xi and said, I'm going to sell you all the oil you want, without having to give in on the vehicles.
And Trump at Davos was connecting economic and national security together. You're bringing up both points as it relates to the risks of bringing these EVs into Canada, both potentially hollowing out their own capacity to economically and sustainably continue to build cars once they get these cheap cars. And then you mentioned that there's this spying capability. How are Canadians reacting to this?
I think Canadians are more concerned about their jobs going away than about the spying capability. Because the spying capability is more out in the future. Losing your job is right now. People want more money in their pockets. If their jobs go away, they don't have that money to be able to support their families. But in terms of all the discussions at Davos about net zero, about European countries slowing their economies by focusing on Chinese renewables, importing the EVs, importing the wind turbines, importing the solar panels, slowing their economy because this is more expensive. And in the meantime, coming to President Trump and saying, we want you to help us defend against Russia. We want help from you. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to President Trump.
Yeah, that was one of Trump's zingers right at Davos, where he mentioned they're happy to sell those solar or these wind turbines for energy generation, but they don't actually use them themselves. What's happening there as it relates to energy policy?
So I think China has put in place solar and wind, but as a share of total electricity generated and a share of total energy generated by these renewables, it's very small. They are getting most of their power out of their coal-fired power plants. They're building 2 a week. They have a lot of coal. They're using it. It doesn't make any sense for the West to say that we are reducing emissions, shipping our energy-intensive manufacturing off to China, where it's made in a dirtier way, and then patting ourselves on the back, saying we're moving towards net zero. It makes no sense. It strengthens China. It weakens Europe. And thank goodness that President Trump is moving away from renewables to using our own oil and natural gas right here under our feet in the United States.
And it seems like Trump and Ford from Canada were kind of singing from the same hymn book a little bit in their criticism of Carney. What do you expect from Ford and Carney's relationship, as well as Trump, and how Trump may or may not respond if these electric vehicles start getting imported into Canada?
Well, I think it's important for President Trump to be importing more Canadian oil here in the United States. It's refined in our refineries. It creates jobs for American workers. And of course, Premier Ford is very concerned about jobs for his own constituents. He wants the auto jobs, the oil jobs, and it's a win-win with the North America energy platform. We have the heavy crude from Canada, the heavy crude from Mexico, and now Venezuela. We have the light crude that's produced here in the United States, and we refine all that in our refineries, making gasoline, diesel, heating oil that we can export all over the world.
Yeah, and it seems like Trump and Carney, as Trump continues to try to put pressure on Canada economically to join the United States, your wish of bringing in more Canadian oil, it seems like they're tangoing a little bit on that particular point. But I want to move back to the earlier point you made about the security, the national security concerns with these Chinese EVs. Keir Starmer is now going to China as well, and we reported about how the spying and espionage in British society went all the way up to their leadership, and they're now building a new embassy right in the center of London where all of the communication lines run. What is the potential advantage for Chinese espionage with the export of these EVs? And is that something that we should worry about, not just with Canada, but also with London and with the UK?
Yes, it was reported that for 3 years, the Chinese were listening in to parliamentary conversations in London at the very highest level. You know, these Europeans are in a bind. They put these net zero targets to reduce CO2. So they're basically requiring electric vehicles, but their companies cannot make them as cheaply as China because China is subsidizing them. China spends a great deal of its budget subsidizing its exports. It's selling a car called a Dolphin Surf in London for around $22,000. This is a compact four-door sedan. And so these Europeans need to do something about their net zero targets. Then they will not be as dependent on EVs. They won't have to import these Chinese EVs. And they can solve this themselves if they want to. And what they do about emissions is irrelevant to global temperatures. Because if they stopped using all fossil fuels right now, it would only make a difference of 1 degree Celsius by the year 2100. It makes no difference to global temperatures at all. Meanwhile, China is building 2 coal-fired power plants a week to make these EVs, to make the renewables. It makes zero sense for the Europeans to go down this path, Carrie.
You explain it so eloquently why China is lobbying for these net zero policies, because their cars are actually a Trojan horse that they can subsidize. Appreciate you breaking it down. Diana Furchtgott-Roth, so great to see you. Thank you.
Great to be with you.